Teachers of Reddit, what is your "this student is so smart it's scary" story? Story 1. I had a student ask for an extension on their paper because they were representing our nation in the World Science Festival. They came in third, and the paper was an A. Story 2. Had a first grader figure out exponents on his own. Edit. Also to note, the kid knew numbers but we had to read the directions to him because he couldn't read well enough yet. Story 3. I taught high school math. One of my freshman students divided 1134 by 63 in his head in less than a second. I let him finish the problem, and then after he arrived at his answer, I asked him, "How did you do that?" He looked at me with this blank stare as if he was thinking, "You can't do that." He proceeded to say, "Well, I doubled 63 and then multiplied that by 10, and then I saw that 1134 was just the difference of those two numbers, so 18. Looked at me like it was nothing. I told him good work and moved on. I'm only above average at a few things, but one of them is mental math. When I saw that this kid could do this calculation that I couldn't, I was so happy. It was one of my happiest moments as a teacher. I didn't help him in that moment, but to know I played a small part in his math education felt so good. Edit. Okay, I get it, you're all geniuses. I wish I had you all in my math class. Story 4. Kid took the fat highlighters, cut them open and removed the insides and replaced it with weed, sold them at school. He was caught, but only because a kid snitched after they were caught getting high. Absolutely brilliant. Story 5. We had a 4-year-old in preschool. He was sitting under the table writing down numbers for a long time. He had no time to talk to us. When he came out and we looked at what he had been doing, he said he wrote down all the multiplications. It turns out his brother in 5th grade was learning the multiplication table, and this little brother really wanted to do the same, but did not have a multiplication table. He counted on his fingers to add each column, and got the table right. A few days later he knew multiplication. He would also comment on dates. If someone told they had their birthday on June 12th, he would say that is in 184 days almost immediately. On an excursion we passed some statues with birth and death dates, and he would casually sum up he was 78 years and 110 days old, she was born 33 years and 120 days before him, etc. I think he was maybe more focused and willing to understand, than necessarily so smart. Edit. Since got some traction. This kid is really the whole package. He is enthusiastic about everything, gymnastics, science, art, math, not at all to compete, just because it is what he likes. Other kids just follow him, and he is the off in the center, and he is kind and nice. Never seen him push, hassle or brag, just enjoys taking in all facets of life. I just wanted to show him I could see who he was. I treated him as an adult in conversations and feedback. He was of course childish in many ways, but behind the noise of childishness was a wise soul I wanted to know and encourage. Ho Silver. Story 6. I'm a piano teacher on the side, teaching a 4-year-old how to read sheet music before she can read books. I ask her to find the CS and she will point then out on the page ECT. She can also do math really well and understands the concept of multiplication. Also another student that just started and plays by ear and composes her own pieces at 8. She also speaks 5 languages, which I didn't find out until I told her I was learning German. After teaching her for 3 months she's already to the point where I had to send her to a better teacher. Story 7. One of my kindergartners just knows multiplication, and not just the basic 5s or 10s. In the beginning when his parents told me I played along with 2 by 2 or 10 by 10, but you can tell him 17 by 14 and he knows it instantly. So cool to watch. Story 8. I was doing a 500-piece puzzle with some kids. I was a preschool teacher. We finished the puzzle, except for one piece which was nowhere to be found. Kid comes and takes one look at the puzzle on the table, says, "Oh, are you missing that? I know where it is." Reaches into another completely different 500-piece puzzle, rummages for like 10 seconds, pulls the piece out, fits it in. I ask him how he knew it was there. He said he had done the other puzzle for a bit and noticed it. I asked him how long ago Christmas. He says, it was February at the time. Kid was maybe 5 at the time. Might be more memory than intelligence. But that was crazy to see. Such a great kid, in somewhat dire circumstance. I hope he's gotten all the opportunities he deserved. Story 9. Not a teacher but a proud big brother. My baby sister was 5 when I came home from college for the summer after actually figuring out calculus. And I explained it to her, and she wrote it down in her journal. Yes, she kept one from the time she was about 4. Fast forward after she skipped a few grades in elementary school and she was taking calculus in high school, and could not understand why it was so easy, and reread her journal, figured it out, and called me laughing. She has a PhD in high-energy physics and does research at CERN. Yeah, that stuff, desperately proud of her. Story 10. A student at my school had OCD, so just memorized the textbook and wrote out the correct chapter for each question. Also their handwriting was so neat that it looked like it had been typed out with a typewriter. Story 11. Not a teacher, but had a classmate who was and still is a genius. I distinctly remember him asking very complex questions on the current reading literature and making constructive arguments. It was over my head, but our teacher was offended and argued back that he didn't understand anything and an overachiever. I think they were over her head as well. She screamed at him and stormed out of class a number of times. There was a time she asked him to leave as well. I never felt so bad for a classmate. He didn't deserve to be yelled at like that. I believe he's now a mathematician with published works and awards as well as a successful musician. Story 12. Not a teacher, but a kid in my grade ended up taking courses 2 years ahead of the rest of us advanced kids. The funny part was that he skipped his own mother's class and wrote novels during middle school math. He's published 3 books and currently has over 95 in every class. Story 13. My mother told me a story once of a kid she went to high school with. This kid was the local stoner but incredibly smart. He was talking college courses way before everyone else, saying they ran out of math for me dog. Story 14. I had a first grader with a speech impediment who was asking for a type of book. His peers and I couldn't understand him no matter how hard we tried. Finally, he gave up and without any frustration, he found a picture book with someone stirring a pot on the cover. He opened the book and skimmed through words until he found what he was looking for, the word cooking. He showed me the book and pointed, telling me that was the word he had been trying to say. He wanted a cookbook. This was a 6-year-old. Story 15. My mom was a student teacher in the early 1970s. She recounts the story of a gifted first grader that nobody really knew how to handle. Every day her mentor would give the child a copy of the New York Times and let him read during her class. Much later my mom was working as a speech therapist and had a severely autistic child that would come in daily. After their lessons he would spend his free time drawing elaborate and accurate city maps on the whiteboard. It was fascinating. Story 16. I was a student teacher at the time completing my education degree. I taught 8th grade. There was this one girl who was your typical edgy, angsty 13-year-old who was too cool for everything. When we went through our poetry unit, we gave a project in which the kids had to write their own freeform poem and put it to some sort of video or slideshow. This girl wrote a poem about how the United States education system as it is stifles creativity and destroys students' joy of learning. I always remember this one line from her poem: I learned more from an evening watching Hamilton on stage than an entire year in United States history class. The video was your typical angsty black and white shots of her friends standing solemnly in front of or behind chain link fences and signs that say no trespassing. The next day she showed up with a gigantic biography of Alexander Hamilton. It was bigger than most Bibles. It only took her a week to read it. My mentor teacher hated her because she thought the student thought she was smarter than everyone else and was arrogant. Maybe she did think that. Maybe she thought we were annoying simpletons. But I just thought she was dope. As this kid didn't particularly like or dislike me, hated my mentor teacher, and disliked anyone except a couple friends. She was smart, she had a finely tuned bullshit meter, she had a huge vocabulary and an obvious love of learning, she'd grill out book after book. And where my mentor teacher saw arrogance in her poem project, I just saw a girl who was desperately bored and was asking for a challenge. I tried my best to give her extra, more challenging options in the future for her assignments. She never said anything to me, but I got the feeling she appreciated it, or I hope she did. Story 17. Obligatory, not a teacher comment. There was once a kid in the grade above me in middle school that hacked the school database and deleted everyone's grades. He was expelled. Edit: this was about 6 years ago, and it wasn't just as easy as using a teacher's username and password, as teachers only had access to change grades in their own classes. He was caught because he bragged about it. He was just one of those kinds of kids. Story 18. I have a 5-year-old this year who has stolen my wallet more times than I'd like to admit. From my pocket, without me knowing, I now wear a wallet chain like I don't remember what decade it is. He still tries, but he hasn't figured out a workaround yet. Story 19. I have a student who is an immigrant that speaks fluent English. I assumed that she grew up in the USA. She told me she had been here for a year and knew zero English before coming. I was amazed. I have another student who just does calculations instantly in his head. He doesn't have to think. When he learns more math, it just becomes automatic. He explained that numbers just make sense. Story 20. Worked at a special purpose preschool designed for kids on the autism spectrum. Did an intake day with a kiddo 4 years old where I was just trying to have fun and see what kind of things he liked. Did some time on the computer where we surfed around YouTube a bit. He searched up a video about our solar system, and began to explain to me the difference between the inner solar system and the outer solar system, what they're made of, sizes, electromagnetic fields to compensate for distance from the sun, etc. I had to Google everything he was saying, because I had no idea if it was true. Spoiler alert, it was. Story 21. My mom had a second grader who skipped the knowledge dump stage and listened better than a grown man. For example, when other boys would tell you all their dinosaur facts, he would ask her, I am curious, MS. Later, dude, what do you think caused the extinction of the dinosaurs? His emotional intelligence was through the roof. Story 22. My son has a fascination with nuclear physics and science. He's collected commonly found radioactive minerals that I made him get rid of so the whole house doesn't get cancer. He's researching a way to build a miniature thorium reactor and insists the only reason it doesn't exist now is because people have given up on it. He's 15. My oldest daughter is an incredible artist, but she's got that attitude like her doesn't smell bad. She's always made incredible drawings with simple pencils and paper since she was a child. She could capture your likeness in her mind with a glance and draw you out with a piece of standard white typing paper and an office number too. She's now 18. My youngest daughter watches death metal goats on YouTube. She's about to turn 14. Story 23. I work with 18 to 24-month-olds and we have an 18-month-old who can have literal conversations, perfect sentence structures, perfect verb conjugation, perfect pronunciation, even L and R, knows all the alphabets, numbers, colors, shapes, by sight. Some of the others know some of those things, but I've never seen a baby this advanced. I sometimes forget she's only 1 year old because she seems more like 3, 5, just tiny like a 1-year-old. Her dad brought her back from a well baby checkup telling us that the doctor asked does she say any words yet, and we all lolled cause she has full conversations. Story 24. Not a teacher, but my oldest daughter is smart as a whip, and am not just being that dad. Others have commented on it. At 4 years old she introduced her mother and I to another couple using our first names. We asked her why and she replied, well, you're not their mom and dad, why would I introduce you as that, and looked confounded as to why we asked. Like duh dudes. She is consistently on a honor roll now without much effort, which kind of worries me, honestly, and she reads and understands books way beyond her level. Oddly, she wants to be a police officer. Story 25. Since I'm not a teacher either, my mom was a very average student, didn't try very hard, and was not planning to go to college. Back when she was in school, they used to administer IQ tests. A couple of months after she takes an IQ test, the school calls my grandparents and says we need to talk about your daughter. Everyone is like, oh Lord, what did she do now? They both go to the school and the principal sits them down. Your daughter has an IQ of 140, but she's failing algebra. We think you should send her to a psychiatrist. My grandfather was livid he took off work for this. No, she never saw a psychiatrist, and she didn't go to college, but she's pretty smart. Story 26. I'm not a teacher, but my uncle is a professor at a uni in our state. He teaches a notoriously hard class, with a final average in the B range. Some kid managed to get a 99 on the exam, and because it hadn't happened in a few years, my uncle rounded the grade to a 100. I don't know if he was allowed to, and what's even more crazy is that the last person to get an A on the final was the student's cousin, who had recommended the class to him when he found out that he got into the school. Edit, I fixed a typo. Reddit, let me swear. Edit again. I was talking with my uncle last night because his birthday is in a few days, March 26th, for anyone who cares, and I brought up how I made a post on Reddit and he corrected me as the grade on last year's final exam was in the C- to D range, with about 20 of the class failing the class. Story 27. My friend took the ACT when we were in 7th grade and got a 31. I don't know how because they don't teach you half of that material until high school. Of a guy though, would intentionally get questions wrong on really difficult tests so he wouldn't kill the curve for the rest of us. Former school aide here. I once had a very tiny lad surprise me. For typical development would be learning basic alphabet recognition and first sounds towards word forming. However, he took some clay and made an plan plain planets across the table and wandered off again. Story 28. My twin brother, who we just recently found out that he is on the spectrum for Asperger's. When we were 3 he would read the old-fashioned maps to my mother and tell her where to go. Fast forward to 8 years old, he would read at college level. Now we're 16, he's still very smart, but very autonomy. Mother calls it this due to the fact that he always had different levels of sensitivity attuned to certain things, but when I was 3, I was just learning how to eat on my own, due to medical problems that I still have to this day. Story 29. Not a teacher, but had a classmate in my American government class in a community college about 910 years ago. Our teacher gives 3 questions for you to pick one of them to write about for the test in essay format. You get the question about a week or so to prepare you to study your subject question. Most people write an average of 5 to 8 pages during the test. This guy writes around 20 pages, give or take. Even the teacher was dumbfounded. He did this for every test, and this is a 3-term class. You don't have to take all terms, or even take it order if you happen to do all 3. Yes, he got A's, he wanted to get into politics. I heard of overachievers, but WTF, who does that? Story 30. I'm not a teacher, nor am I smart. But in 5th grade I taught myself how to use Inspect Element, and I changed web pages and stuff to be funny. I even changed my grades. The teacher thought I was actually hacking and freaked out. I had to explain that it wasn't real hacking and that the website only changed for me and not anyone else. Story 31. I teach kids with autism that learn on the alternate curriculum, usually lower level academics, and have cognitive delays. I'm always amazed that while they might struggle in one area, the strengths they have. I had one girl who knew everyone's birthday, everyone she met, day, month, year, and age. She could also do crazy math in her head. I have another kid who is minimally verbal but knows every locker combination in the school, 2 others who are amazing artists, another who could tell you what 80s movie icon shared a birthday with you. I love my kids. Story 32. I coach Science Olympiad, which naturally draws some very smart students. I was on a long bus ride with them to nationals and sat next to one of our 7th graders. This kid had to be one of the smartest kids I've ever met. He's brilliant. We ended up playing 20 questions and I decided to be A and do something really hard and specific, settling on whiptail lizard. First question, is it a vertebrate? I said yes. Second question, does it reproduce parthenogenically? Yes. Third question, it's a whiptail lizard. Kid got my obscure animal in 3 guesses. He just graduated high school last year. I believe he's going to an Ivy. Story 33. My mom had a special needs student who went on some field trip to one of the NASA centers. I don't remember where. His dad was an IT guy, I think, and had been teaching this kid around 10 years old, I think, stuff on the side because he was all about computers. Kid wandered off and apparently found some office or computer lab or something unlocked. Walked in, sat down at a computer, figured out how to unlock that terminal, and started browsing through their internal stuff for a while before someone caught him. He got in big trouble for that one, but I don't know if it even registered in his mind what a huge issue that could be. He would do it at school and nobody cared too much, so I don't think he saw an issue doing it out in the real world. He came to my mom the next year or the year after that when his family moved, and my mom was warned not to leave her personal electronics unattended because he would figure out how to get in. Story 34. Not a teacher and kinda stupid, but I was a musical prodigy when I was in elementary school. I could play around 6 different instruments before middle school, piano being the main and first one I learned at 4, then the flute, clarinet, percussion, trumpet, and finally guitar when my hands got big enough. In middle school band, if another student couldn't play a solo, I would just do it on whatever instrument it called for. I gave it all up in high school and college for sports because I got really bored. Also, side note, kids like this, including myself, grow up to have severe anxiety and depression. I developed social anxiety disorder and still in therapy for it today. I always felt like I couldn't fit in or relate to kid my age at the time and had the overwhelming feeling of never being good enough at anything. Story 35. I'm not a teacher, I'm a student, but one of my classmates just has so much random memorized. Ask him about anything, like the Crimean War, how to build a combustion engine, random useful bits of information about bands from the 70s, as well as being an excellent student in every single subject. He's also managed to teach himself Cyrillics or whatever that Russian alphabet thing is, and can speak Russian pretty well, despite never having taken a class of it in his life. It's just nuts, he's so good at so many random things. Story 36. Not a teacher, but my 4-year-old daughter. We were driving in my van, so she was in the front seat always asking questions. I can't remember what the first question was, but my answer was it's relative. Then of course she asks, what does that mean? I couldn't think of a better way to explain it than outlining Einstein's thought experiment of a candle on a train. After I explained it, she was very quiet for about 2 minutes, and I thought, too far, you just confused her, and she chips in with, is that why sometimes when a car goes next to us we feel like we are going backwards? Yes, that is exactly right. Story 37. A kid's work kept deleting itself on a computer every few minutes. He was having a meltdown, and I saw it happen. It was impossible to explain the phantom deleting that was going on. Fast forward to the end of the class, and there's one kid remaining, that was sitting at the opposite computer from the kid who lost all his work. He looks at me and says, "You want to know how I did, sir?" He had put in a USB keyboard into the back of the computer, and had it set up so he could hit the delete key with his big toe. It was the funniest stealth attack I'd seen in a long time. Being the teacher, I should have done something, but it was too funny and smart. Story 38. Not exactly what's being asked, but it sort of fits. I was the student. I could do 3-digit by 3-digit multiplication in my head in 5th grade, so I did it on my homework without showing any work. My teacher, in front of the whole class, insisted that I cheated and that I must have used a calculator. I was a rule follower and really cared about my schoolwork, so this devastated me. I told my parents and they contacted her, and she was incredibly rude and told them that I'd be a child prodigy if I could do that, and insisted that I was cheating. My parents said they have never seen me using a calculator, and she replied with, "Do you watch her every second?" Despite her insisting, my parents believed me and tested me by giving me random multiplication problems, all of which I was able to do, and chewed the teacher out. She apologized but still forced me to show my work from then on. I can only assume she felt threatened that a student was better at mental math than her. TLDR teacher didn't believe that I could do multiplication of large numbers in my head and treated me and my parents rudely as a result. Story 39. Not exactly what was asked, but a guy I know figured out in 5th grade that the teacher was really unorganized. She typically had a desk scattered full of papers. He wouldn't turn in his homework, and when she asked where it was he would swear he had turned it in. He would have more time to finish his homework, and when he was done he'd crumple it up a bit and throw it on the ground somewhere around her desk. He'd watch her sort through her mess, pick up the past due assignment, and then continue to grade it. Next day he'd have full credit for it. He did it 3 to 4 times before she caught on. She was too embarrassed to really discipline him for it. Story 40. My daughter was too young to go to religious school, but once a month they had a parent and kid class, mostly art projects and story time. After finishing a story about an upcoming holiday, my 4-year-old daughter raises her hand and asks, "But what if there's no God?" The teacher just stares and then looks at me and says, "Go ask your dad." She never did ask me, but I get interesting questions from her weekly. Story 41. A bonus nephew, not student but still, is incredibly intelligent. Like he attended some math competition, won a 3-day math lecture. Why though? Pretty impressive. I remember a party of his when he was 14, he tried to teach me some math equation. Needless to say I had no clue what he was doing. Especially being 7 to 8 years older than him, I felt a bit humiliated. My stepfather said like 5 years ago that he was surpassing him, and he's been an engineer his entire life and also very good with math. I'm pretty sure this guy will be a well-established mathematician. I'm guessing his IQ is closer to 150 than 100. If not above. Maybe I should ask him next time. Story 42. I had a student maybe 5 to 6 years ago. I teach social studies. Dude didn't come in direct contact with her areas. She was truly special, but anyway she could speak 5 languages pretty fluently. English is her native. She learned French in middle school, taught herself Russian and Italian for the sake of reading, and learned Indonesian from being around kids in the school and wanting to pick it up. She could write music just from hearing it, then reproduce it with essentially no time. I don't know if this is common or not, but it absolutely shocked me. She's bar none the best student I've seen as a teacher with regards to conveying herself through written work. She graduated just a few weeks after turning 16, one of those kids who effortlessly glides to top of her class. Last I heard, she was about to graduate in something related to archaeology. Story 43. In my gifted class we had a boy who left to go to college. In 7th grade, he was always first to figure out the problems our instructors set forth and never failed to challenge me, which was impressive. Even more impressive was his response when challenged. A lot of us would get frustrated because we weren't acclimated to struggling. He wholeheartedly loved it. Story 44. When my little cousin was 5 or 6, we took him to a kids' day at the local conservatory. The professors were doing an ELI 5 talk on the Doppler effect, explaining how you can hear it when cars go by, that they use it to tell which direction the universe is moving. My cousin thought for a second, then asked, "Does time have a Doppler effect?" The professors looked stunned. Edit. When he was 10, the computer pinball game that he liked had a bug where the ball would get stuck and make him lose. He went into the program, found the broken code, and fixed it. Story 45. Well, I'm a school psychologist and a kindergartner. I tested, got a 141 IQ. It's easier to score higher the younger you are when you're given an IQ assessment, but that was the highest anyone in our department ever got. Story 46. My 2-year-old son is obsessed with letters. He is already a prolific speller. He seems to memorize words he sees and spells from memory. One morning he comes into my bedroom while I'm half asleep. I roll over and see that he has brought in his puzzle letters. After waking up properly, I see that he spelt out symphony. He's gonna be annihilating his friends at spelling bees later on. Story 47. I'm not a teacher, but we had a bright kid in our class. We used to do drill tests in our class at age 10. They were about 30 times sums, and this one girl did them correctly in under a minute. Story 48. My favorite pre-K student of all time. His nickname was Snowcrab. This is how he got it. Snowcrab ran into the classroom right to me as he was being dropped off in the morning, shouting, "Look, my crab." English was not his first language. He is holding up a small orange plastic crab and is incredibly proud of it, grinning from ear to ear. I look at it and tell him, "That's great, Snowcrab, but I'm going to need you to keep the crab in your backpack during the day." He narrows his eyes at me, saying I put in pocket like it's a compromise. I smile, trying not to laugh, and tell him, "If you don't put it in your backpack, I'm going to take it." He nods and says I put in backpack and goes to his cubby to put his crab away. I love that kid so much. I wish the rest of my 4-year-old students caught on as quickly as he did. Story 49. I'm not the teacher, but I know someone who, in a Cambridge University math class, answered every question in the textbook in less than a month, and was only wrong on a small handful of problems. She did it in her free time, because she was bored. Edit. I forgot to mention it's one of the high school Cambridge University math classes, which is part of a program they started to get more people ready for college, and now I feel like an idiot for forgetting to mention that part. Story 50. Not a teacher, but my friend. She was that kid who would always get in trouble during class for reading, and she always had a stack of at least 3 books on her. The other day I was labeling a map of Africa for shits and giggles to see if I could get it, and she made me feel like a by correcting my mistakes. She didn't have a map in front of her or anything, she just knew African geography for some reason. It isn't specific to Africa either. You can show her a flag of a country and she'll tell you what country it is and the previous versions of that flag. It scares the out of me. I always thought I was a passable geography nerd. Story 51. Had a kid program an original app that was almost identical to Uber but for public transport and upload it to his phone. Shut his phone down and overheated from too much pinging on the GPS. Dude troubleshot it and made it work. Works for Apple now. Kid's a genius. Story 52. I work with special needs kids and will never forget this one with high-functioning autism, mostly just social and sensory issues, who was a math genius. He was 4 years old, and whenever we would have a group play hide and seek, everyone would count to 10, except him. He would say things like, "I'll give you 20 seconds to hide, so we'll count to 540 by 27s," or some other randomness. I would listen in and write all his counts down and check them later, and he always nailed them 100. Story 53. My best friend was working on 8th grade math books in the 3rd grade and was absolutely killing it. He went on to get a 1560 on the SAT in high school. Cold-blooded. Story 54. On a more somber note, was working with children with disabilities and had a 4th grader come tell me I hate that'll never be normal. It was really heartbreaking to see how intelligent many of those students were despite their disabilities. It hurt that he could comprehend his situation but couldn't entirely overcome biology. Story 55. As a precursor, I know I'm not a genius, but I can spell the out of words. It's been 15 years, but I'm still salty as about this. I was in the final 2 for my state-level spelling bee in middle school. To this day, I still remember the word I lost on. It was antediluvian. I spelled that correctly. But the judges told me I had spelled it incorrectly because their card, presumably, had an I in place of the E. They told me I was incorrect. I told them, "No, you're incorrect. I memorized every word in the guide and that is correct." They informed me I was wrong and had lost. I still hold a grudge against those bastards. I deserved that trophy, and they stole it from me and gave it to Stephanie. Stephanie, I was a 6th grade teacher and had a 3rd grade student move into my class. I simply could not challenge him. He could do 8th grade work with ease. I was astounded by how bright he was. Story 56. I teach ESL in China and have this one 7-year-old student who remembers everything. He will read a word or a sentence and then remember it a year later and point it out in his book I had forgotten it. I will say a word and he pronounces it perfect and always will. He speaks better than my daughter and has a larger vocabulary. I like him most because he understands what he is saying, reading and hearing. He will often pre-read and understand it without being told. He would brag and ask embarrassing questions until I told him that he should be trying to help the other students and that making them feel bad slows them down. Now, he helps the others understand the material. Story 57. I had a student with autism who could calculate trigonometry ratios in his head to several decimal places. We could ask, "Hey George, what's the sine of 62? George would take few seconds and shout, 0.88295. I have never figured out how he did it without a calculator. He had violent outbursts and terrible social skills. He's been in and out of jail since high school, and I've lost track of him over the years. It's really sad. Story 58. I've had a few different super smart kiddos. One student of mine with autism could, when given any date from the 1900s 2000s, tell you what the day of the week was. He tried to explain to us how he knew once, but the explanation didn't make sense to any of us. Another student of mine was hyperlexic, essentially the opposite of dyslexia. He could write well above his grade level and read any word you put in front of him. We once gave him one of our college textbooks and he read it back to us, didn't understand it, but pronounced every word correctly and read it fluently. He was a first grader. Finally, I recently had a second grader who had already mastered the entirety of the 5th grade math curriculum and everything before that. His previous teacher didn't know what to do with him, so she put him on Khan Academy all the time. I did what I could, but it's hard to keep up with kids so far above grade level. Story 59. I teach shop. The brilliance I see is different than most teachers would. I have students that I give a little knowledge and they can manipulate it and apply it to unrelated problems. I've had a few students where they have mostly DS and FS, but run rings around my students because they have crazy good 3D reasoning and can apply knowledge that isn't linear, pattern recognition. Story 60. When my daughter was 3, she taught herself to read. Preschool taught her the letters, but she figured out the actual reading part by herself. We don't really know how she put the letters together into words. She built up a huge vocabulary by turning on the captions while she watches TV.